the end of the day, it just makes a lot of sense. You know, ecologically speaking, for the future, for us as humans, it makes a lot of sense to protect, you know, the world's oldest, you know, most continuously evolving rainforest in the world.
Hi there, welcome to Finding Space with Alex Tyson, the show that celebrates the everyday legends who put in the hard work to become who they want to be and live the life they want to live. For people who understand that when we practice compassion and find wisdom within ourselves, we find success and happiness. Join me in hearing amazing stories from everyday individuals who have found incredible personal and professional growth through varied and, at times, wild methods of self-improvement and self-responsibility, and through their unique perspectives and work, have gone on to better the lives of those around them. From nurturing health to growing your wealth, or enjoying the present to crafting your future, no aspect of life is off topic. Branden, Barber, Kristin, Canning, thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So we're going to have a great conversation today. We're going to talk about Rainforest Rescue. We're going to talk about some of the amazing needed work that you guys do. But before we get there, this is for you, Branden. Like, how did you get into this space? Because you don't just become the CEO of an amazing organization like Rainforest Rescue overnight. I'm curious how you got there.
Well, it's a fun story. You know, some people talk about having a calling, and I was very fortunate to have a calling early in life. I thought I was going to be a psychotherapist like my father. I wasn't going to do it his way though, so I went to UC Santa Cruz. And one night when I was staying in the dorms, as you did back then, I was just falling asleep, thinking, you know, big day tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And as I'm drifting off, almost asleep, I shot back to consciousness and I said out loud, "The planet. I've got to help the planet." 18 years old. My roommate says, "Shut up, go back to sleep." And I changed my major the next day. And I was one of the first students at UC Santa Cruz's College 8, which was where they housed the new environmental studies program. And when I finally found my way through school, I wound up in Australia, and just serendipitously, my new Australian girlfriend, who is my consistent partner in all things. We've been together for a long time and have created a beautiful life together. But back then, we didn't know what we were doing. And we heard that the Rainbow Warrior was in Perth. So we got in the car and drove for 3 days.
Wow.
And literally rocked up to the Rainbow Warrior and said, "Hey, do you guys need any help?" And it turns out they did. They had 6 weeks in dry dock coming up, and we wound up being volunteers. We had our own cabin. It was like, I felt like I'd just gotten this gig as an astronaut with NASA. You know, it felt that exciting to me to be on the Rainbow Warrior. And we really just fell in love, the crew, all of us. We just fell in love, and we had some really strong bonding experiences. One of our crew members actually died in our actions, and it was really profound, and it brought us all together like you could never imagine. And my fate was sealed at that point. So Felix Van Chin, wherever you are, you're still doing it, buddy. And then you know, from GreenPeace, I wound up coming back to the US briefly, went back to Australia and applied for the job of running GreenPeace's Victorian office. And this was back when laptops were really ridiculous, and I had a special case, and I really impressed the guys. Like, wow, that guy brought a laptop. So I got the job, and that was the second most fun job I think I'd had. The first one definitely on the boats, but then you know, being responsible for Victoria's response to environmental emergencies. And at that time, we were looking at point sources of pollution coming from the land into the ocean. And then, of course, the French decided to start nuclear testing again. So we had a lot of fun shenanigans with the French embassy there. And yeah, it just kind of kept going that way. I wound up getting interested in the internet, and this is when it was just a new thing. And I made GreenPeace's first website. Didn't mean to make it the first website, but The Australian office was the first Greenpeace office to have a website. And I took a break. I learned some things. I went back and forth. Wound up working at Rainforest Action Network as their development director. Did that for 5 years. It was an incredible journey, incredible team. That place between advocacy and activism. Learned a lot. And then wound up jumping over to Amazon Watch, where I'd been on the board and had been hearing that they just couldn't find someone to fill their development director role. So I wound up doing that for a couple of years, which took me down to South America, working with indigenous peoples on Amazon protection and cultural protection issues. Eventually there was a job that was listed in Australia based in Mullumbimby of all places. And my partner and I had driven through here a long, long time ago. And we said, oh, wow, Mullumbimby, this would be a fun place to live. Anyway, next thing you know, hey, kids, we're moving back to Australia. They were not thrilled. They were teenagers, but now they're grateful and everything has worked out. And I'm really happy to have been here at Rainforest Rescue for the last 4.5 years almost. And just have a tremendous team. Kristin she's the only person at the organization who's been here longer than I have. And she's probably the best value of anyone I've ever worked with, other than Mary Beth. And no, I couldn't be happier with the growth of the organization, the development of a brand new culture that is really rooted in, transparency, respect, collaboration, and integrity, meaning what you say and doing what you say you'll do. And Rainforest Rescue's got a really good reputation because we live by those values. And it's, we're growing. We started back in 1999 and kind of went up and down and up and down. And in the last 4.5 years, we've tripled our size, our capacity, our income. And now we've got a whole new program coming online with this very productive nursery up in the Daintree to serve restoration services up there. So anyway, that's a long version of how I wound up here talking to you.
What was it like when you started doing that work with Greenpeace back in the day, if you will? Like, I'm just really curious because you hear so much about Greenpeace. It's like the mecca, but like, what was it like? What were the kind of things that you were doing?
Well, first, there we were in dry dock. And that's where you get to do things like needle gun to remove, decades of paint and rust, and chisel anchor chains, and literally climb into water tanks to needle gun them and clean them out, vacuum them out, and then reseal them and paint them inside.
Right.
That was an interesting experience. So in terms of the, the glamour and the excitement, and getting a break out of the water tank was pretty good. But there was this sense that, we were on the pointy edge of, protecting nature and helping inspire people to do more. And it was very exciting. We were part of this global network of, rainbow clad ships that were sailing around, stopping whalers and preventing pollution and removing ghost nets and promoting advocacy and establishing Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. And it was a very exciting time. And when I got the job in Victoria, I was where I was supposed to be, working with some of the coolest people I've ever worked with. And I think you can say that, certainly we're not in this for the money, but we're definitely in it for the people and for the work and, the meaning that this brings. So just on the Greenpeace note, it's been hard watching some of the organizations that have always been at that pointy end deal with the increased complexities and risks around the law in countries that are trying to quash protests, quash any dissent. And, we're still in a world that is favoring the dollar versus nature. And, it's not a battle that anybody won. And sometimes I get up and I think, ooh, this is going to be close. But I still believe it'll be close and we're going to win. And, the more people that I engage with, who are excited to be planting trees, who are just thrilled with the work of Rainforest Rescue and other organizations that are working so hard to help promote protecting the environment, restoring the environment, and doing it boots on the ground. It's really intense time on planet Earth right now, and we can turn it around. We have the technology, trees. We don't need an X Prize to come up with a new carbon sequestration machine. We're growing them, and as I've been watching the private sector's approach to making money from protecting the environment and restoring the environment, it's an interesting contrast between values, and yet the outcomes are going to be the same. And the whole carbon movement has been such a wave of capital interest and corporations looking to improve their sustainability programs and to be on the cutting edge of green. But carbon's just the tip of the iceberg. Carbon is awesome, and I feel like it's the gateway commodity for restoration and forest protection. You've got different types of carbon projects, from planting to avoided deforestation. And avoided deforestation is like, okay, here's, for instance, this island in, say, Papua New Guinea that's covered with jungle rainforest. People have been cutting it down. Wow, well, let's make an agreement with the government that we won't do that, and we're going to turn it into a giant carbon project, and we're going to sell carbon units, and all the people that live here are going to have a living wage for 30 plus years, and the kids are going to have a better shot at school. And that's just carbon, because when you look at the other benefits that nature brings, it's not just, how can we slow down global warming? Thank you, the industrial age. But how can we improve the environment so that there's more oxygen, there's more habitat, the web of life is strengthened, the soil is healthy. Soil's a fantastic carbon sink, and it provides us with, so much of what we need to live, not just live, but to be healthy. And that diversity of life is essential to our ability to thrive. So I feel like the work that we're doing in restoration is helping promote the benefits that nature brings in a way that's inspiring and is slowly starting to see economic returns. There are new benefit schemes up where we work that aren't in play yet, but they're close. And one of them is called cassowary credits. And cassowary credits, the whole goal is to provide economic incentives for landowners to restore their properties back to full-blown habitat. And there's another one, reef credits, which is all about restoring along riparian zones. So where there's been erosion and denusion because of cattle, what have you, there are actually benefits in play now for landowners to restore that land and protect it. So, it is a race, and it is getting more intense. It's like that rush to the singularity. What's it going to be like once we get here? But I think we're on the right track. And the more I learn about organizations that are supporting private individuals to protect their lands for nature, it surprises me. I never thought I would see the positive side of capitalism like that. And at the same time, it's not at all a done deal. It's not a perfect system. There's been plenty of rorting the carbon programs. We'll see. But in the meantime, we'll plant more trees, we'll propagate more trees, we'll bring more people up there to plant more trees. And our goal is to, whatever isn't being used productively, that people are willing to transition, we want to help turn that back into rich rainforest habitat.
Is the incentive good enough at the moment for people to really start to consider reforesting their properties, people who are owning a lot of the land up that way? Like you're saying that there's some stuff getting close, but even as it is now, or maybe when some of those things get over the line, is the incentive still good enough, given that you're saying, well, most people are unfortunately motivated by the dollar more than they are quality soil? Is the incentive good enough, or have we still got a way to go?
Well, and look, fair call for folks who are concerned about making a living, right? Like this big crazy capitalist system that we're in. Like, it requires that we're able to feed our families in one way or another, and we're not all going back to the land to produce our own food. And it is, it's a legitimate concern. The programs that are in place now are really quite new. And I can't say that there's anything beyond carbon yet that is, really that exciting or supportive. But I think within the next 2 years, you're going to see more of the biodiversity credits. Now, I'm talking about biodiversity credits as opposed to offsets. Offsets are more an opportunity for, land rapers to pay for it. It's almost like buying indulgences. And it's not a good gig. I'm going to dig a giant mine over here, but I'm going to put money in the kitty so that these people over here will do some restoration, support biodiversity somewhere else. But the biodiversity credits recognize restoration as an economic activity that should be supported. I had this vision the other day of all of these private landowners in Australia or all over the world who are literally being paid to look after their growing patch of forest. Like, that's what they do. They just are there to live amidst this growing forest that they've replanted, and their job is to make sure that it grows big and strong and healthy forever. And that's actually a possible outcome. That could happen because of the way this shift is moving. I think that it's going to be, I give it 2 years, but in the short term, there are incentives. The Queensland government has a program called the Land Restoration Fund, and they give out grants for restoration work for private individuals and organizations to do restoration work, like good quality restoration work. And there's a tremendous amount of support in the philanthropic sector because it all comes down to mitigating climate change, right? What can we do? And we like to say that trees are the answer, and we're just going full bore and making more trees and getting more trees in the ground, while at the same time recognizing that an established, biodiverse, healthy, full canopy rainforest is literally irreplaceable. Like, in the short term, right? It's irreplaceable. That is an established, thriving ecosystem. It's an organism in its own right. So we also have a program and it's what we started doing, which was to buy back and protect land that would have been developed. So we keep it as standing forest. And, we're not alone in doing that. There are plenty of organizations around the world that are doing that. We're actually quite small, and we would like to grow to be supportive to local rainforest-based organizations across Australia, maybe someday around the world, wherever we can be useful, but to provide the kind of support that helps initiate and progress private land purchase and protection, as well as restoration programs. And I feel like, we're on the right track. And I feel like the biggest challenge right now is grabbing people's attention and inspiring them to do the same thing. Yeah.
Spot on. And I hope this podcast does a little bit of that. I have one more question just in that space. You talked about offsets there. Could you just unpack how the offsets actually work and perhaps the downsides of that just a little bit more? Because I think there's a lot of confusion out there as to what that means. Like, you're buying a flight with Qantas and you can offset your flight by $3. Where does that money actually go? How does it actually work?
So there are different types of offset programs. And I believe Qantas and other corporations in Australia got in trouble because they were basically signing up for carbon projects that were invalid. I can't remember the stats exactly, but it was something like 8 out of 10 carbon projects in Australia were not. And you literally see examples here and in other parts of the world where people are claiming that they're doing restoration or avoided deforestation. So this is a carbon project, and here's my polygon, and we've measured it, and there's this many trees, therefore it's this much carbon. So we get this many carbon units that we can then sell on the carbon market, so that companies like Qantas buy those, and then you can offset your travel by paying back in, which basically pays them back for the carbon that they bought on your behalf. Unfortunately, it doesn't always pan out, and there's a push in Australia, at least right now, for government oversight and accountability on the carbon projects, because they were so unmonitored or unvetted. And I never thought I would be promoting more government control, but you got to have somebody who is making sure that people are playing fair and that the outcomes that they are offering are real. So that's in a nutshell what carbon offsets through, say, Qantas or pick your favorite airline or whatever it is you want to do that's going to accrue carbon. And I think it's a good system for it's not a bad thing if the projects are good. But then I think there should be carbon taxes, and I think we need to get more real about it. I want to actually see cryptocurrencies leveraged as part of this, so that we start rewarding people with valuable cryptocurrency that we can call carbon credits or carbon coins, as ways for people to actually do carbon positive activities like restoration, right? Or I don't know, burying your car in the ground and riding your bike. I'm not quite sure how we can start giving people carbon positive coins. But quick book plug. There's a great book called Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. And he's a great futurist and a scientist. He's also a terrific fiction writer. And he created this wonderful story about an agency, the Ministry for the Future, that was created to basically enforce the Paris Climate Agreement so that we could make it. And it's actually a great story about all the different ways that we could make it and the challenges that we're facing.
I like that. And mentioning burying the car in the ground, I have this like ongoing joke about like compostable bags and things. And like, if you don't get the compost right, the compostable bag won't compost. It'll just be a bag for however long. And it's like, oh, well, in that case, actually everything's compostable. My iPhone's compostable. It just takes 22,500 years,
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, just chuck it in the compost and it'll be fine. Yeah, cool. Okay. I think that's really important because you see you can offset certain things that you purchase or whatnot, but I think there's a lack of understanding as to where that money actually goes, and understanding that perhaps some of the time it doesn't really go anywhere. That's really helpful. I think is important. So let's move on. I want to talk about the Daintree and what you guys do up there. And my lead into this is that I was lucky enough to spend a week in the Daintree around this time last year, and it was just before Cairns opened up to the public. COVID was still a thing, but I live in Queensland, so we could go up there. Happy days. My partner and I spent a week there, and we were just there essentially by ourselves. There was no tourists, right? And as hard as that was to see for especially Cairns, and just seeing all the boats in the dock and really no revenue happening at all for a lot of these small companies, we were lucky enough to spend time in the Daintree with no one around. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences I've had in my life. It was one of the most incredible landscapes, if you will, that we got to witness. And the ratio of nature to human was in good order. It was us two, and it felt like just acres and acres and hectares of land and forest and bush and water and bogs and everything that the Daintree is. And it was just such a good exposition of what a rainforest is. And, we could talk about all the physiological benefits of being in a place like that. It's pretty obvious. But after that, I found out about you guys, and I was just really drawn to the work that you guys do. So I'm just curious to hear like what you guys do in the Daintree, how it works, what some of your focuses are, and just some information on the Daintree in general, because in Australia, I think it's easy to forget that it's there and how important it is to the global ecosystem. I think is worth focusing on. So that's my on-ramp. Let's talk about the Daintree.
Hey, Kristin, tell us about it.
Thank you, Branden.
And you know what? Do you mind, Alex? Do you mind if we? I wanted to ask Kristin about her first experience in the Daintree and what it was like to encounter that. I don't think I've actually ever heard about your first encounter.
Oh, maybe you haven't. Gosh, it was a long time ago. It was before university, actually, and it was with a friend of mine. And we did the things where you swim in the ocean where you really shouldn't, up in far north Queensland.
Right.
And it's
And
similar to
why
what you.
is that?
What's that?
Why is that? Why don't you swim in places you shouldn't swim in far north
Well,
Queensland?
you probably shouldn't. There are some crocs around. But it was such a magical experience. It was about 20 years ago. And similar to you, Alex, my girlfriend and I, Jane, we just, it felt quiet. It felt, I liked how you said it was all in order, the ratio. That's definitely how it felt to me too. And I think at the end of the day, we can talk about how the wild places are under threat and how it's Rainforest Rescue's one of our main intentions to keep those beautiful wild places protected. But at the end of the day, it just makes a lot of sense, ecologically speaking, for the future, for us as humans, it makes a lot of sense to protect, the world's oldest, most continuously evolving rainforest in the world. And I think the way that I was struck by that experience in the Daintree, I definitely took that with me then to uni. And now I'm here kind of 20 years later, and I've been with Rainforest Rescue for about 10 years, and I can't leave. I just believe so much in what we do. And in terms of what we do at Rainforest Rescue, it's really simple, and yet we can, talk all day about it because it's such a passionate thing for all of us. We basically rescue unprotected Daintree land, and we restore damaged Daintree land. And there's a lot in that. And, we find more and more people and businesses are just really wanting to support it. It's a beautiful thing.
And so a lot of the foresters, when you say you get land and you protect it, so you're actually buying back land and then reforesting it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So buying back land, putting a nature refuge on it and protecting it forever. And that just means, Alex, that it can't ever be developed. And that if we do buy pristine, intact rainforest, it will stay that way. It will be a habitat for all the amazing number of species that are endemic to the area, the flora and the fauna. And then when we do partner with, private landholders, or where we do buy land that has had some damage, from cattle grazing or the like, we then restore it. And that's the fancy way of saying tree planting. So we basically create the habitat for all these species, and more and more. And I know through the updates, Alex, you would have seen, we're seeing endangered species come back to the land, and we're seeing abundant bird life and insect life, and it's just a really beautiful thing.
And just on the Daintree, like, it is the world's longest continuously living, thriving, evolving rainforest. And it's where you can find wacky plants, like some of the most primitive early flowering plants in the world still exist in the Daintree, whereas you'll only find them in the fossil record in other parts of the world. I was walking on one of the blocks that we rescued recently, and I noticed these strange little things. I didn't even know what to call them. They looked like mushrooms, but they had little flowers on them. So I looked it up. It's called bifungosa, and sounds like an Italian plant. But it's this wacky little, it's like a bulb, and they're about this big, and they're in little clusters and colonies, and then on their own. And the bulb is covered with microscopic male flowers. And then you have these adorable little flowers all along the bottom on stalks that look like carnations that are tiny, right? Baby's breath. And it doesn't need anything else to propagate itself. It's got everything it needs. And the Daintree is just full of those kinds of surprises, in addition to just profound nature cathedrals. But the Daintree is, just for the record, in case anybody was wondering, why is the Daintree so interesting and important? First, it's ancient, has deep time lineages that connect to the rest of the world, or the rest of the world connects to the Daintree. But this World Heritage Area contains 40% of Australia's bird species, 35% of Australia's mammal species, 60% of Australia's butterfly species, 20% of Australia's reptile species, 29% of Australia's frog species, 21% of our cycads, 65% of our ferns, and 30% of our orchids. So the Daintree is just chock full of unique life. And it's definitely Australia's most biodiverse rainforest. And it's Australia's largest rainforest. So the Daintree is a very special place. In fact, KP was talking about, the endangered species that live there and that we're seeing come back in the areas that we're restoring. There's a type of tree kangaroo that is Bennett's tree kangaroo. And you'll only find that within like a 50 square kilometer area. And it's like right in the Daintree. And there are also Lumholtz tree kangaroos. You'll find them farther afield in different places, and they're beautiful. But, the Daintree is such a special place. And, it really is a shame that, the Joe Bjelke-Peterson government in the 80s subdivided out the lower Daintree and turned it into developable blocks. And then there was an airstrip and people were going to put hotels in. There are hotels and a resort, a big resort on the beach. And it was just hard. It's hard living up there. And there was a forest blockade. It was the second one in Australia. I think it was in, I want to say 83. And it was just following on the Terania Creek protests, which you may or may not have heard. But if you haven't, look up Terania Creek. And you can also look up Protesters Falls, which is a destination up here in the Nightcap. That was where the first forest protest took place. And then those people went up to the Daintree when there was a road being proposed to go up to Cape Tribulation. And, people saw the value and couldn't believe that, they wanted to put a road through this. And then they wind up subdividing it out. And then the government changed. And when the government changed, there was enough pressure that people were asking the government to buy back the blocks that they'd subdivided. And of course, at that point, people had already started moving up there and making their homes. And ultimately, the Daintree actually has become a community that houses, over 400 people. And, more and more, what I hear from the people up there is not so much, where am I going to put my cattle? And, how are we going to increase services up here? But that they really care about the environment up in the Daintree. And I feel like we're very lucky to have partnerships with community members up there and community organizations, as well as the local Shire Council, Douglas Shire Council. We've got a great relationship with Jabalbina Aboriginal Corporation. They recently received back the entirety of the Daintree, as well as 4 other national parks up there. And we're working with them in our current nursery. We have a small nursery that we've had for about 10 years, which has propagated all of the trees that we've used for restoration up to this point. Only 12,000 or so trees a year. It's quite small. I mean, that, over time, that's great. And we do have a template process program for doing restoration in a way that best mimics what nature would create on its own. That was created by our scientific advisor, Dr. Robert Koyman. And it's, about 6,500, 7,000 trees per hectare. And just to go back to carbon projects generally will do 1,000 trees per hectare. So we're really not talking carbon projects. We're talking biodiverse rainforest restoration. Now we're just about done building our new nursery. And the new nursery came about because as a board, Rainforest Rescue's board decided that we needed to do more to inspire as well as directly act on climate change. How do we do that? We plant more trees. How do we get more trees? We grow more trees. We couldn't actually do much with our current nursery because if we started expanding it, we would wind up encroaching on forests that we'd already replanted and restored. So I had to find a new place. And I mentioned that the airstrip in the Daintree occurred, and it was part of this big push to develop the Daintree and turn it into the next, Port Douglas, Cairns, whatever people could make of it. But it never really took off. And a year and a half ago, I got a call from one of our volunteers who said, they're selling the Daintree's airstrip. They're selling the old Cow Bay airstrip. We gotta buy it. We gotta stop it. There's a pilot who's talking about reopening it. And so I called someone, and that someone said, well, sure, we'll check it out. And then within a month, they had purchased it and had granted us a 25-year lease to start as a place to put our new nursery. And then we've got another 15 hectares of restorable land that we can work on with them. So working with Jabalbina Aboriginal Corporation, just to go back to that, my hope is that with our current nursery, which is on national park land, which is now traditional owner land, we've got a grant that is paying for traditional owner staff to come work at the current nursery and then at the new nursery. The idea being that we learn from each other. They'll share with us the traditional medicinal food values of these plants, the cultural values of these plants, while we help establish what it takes to actually restore a complex biodiverse ecosystem in the Daintree. And, I want to see that nursery become dedicated for Jabalbina, and their core goal with their strategic plan right now is all around ecotourism in addition to managing these national parks. And I just see this as a great opportunity to bring traditional culture with modern horticultural practices in this terrific facility so that it will support them with their cultural plants and their goals with tourism. And we've got this bigger nursery and we'll continue to support as we go. That was a long answer to your question.
And there's so much good stuff there. I'm curious, just the nuts and bolts of, the land was given back to the Aboriginal community up there. What does that actually mean? Is that like literally they have the titles to the land there? I don't understand that.
So there was an agreement called SIPAL. It was the Cape York Peninsula Aboriginal Land Agreement. And it took many years to negotiate, and they just succeeded last year and a half ago, and maybe 2 years ago now. And they own the land. And not only do they own the land, they have to administer the national park. So they're working in partnership with the national park system. Ultimately, their stated goal is that they will manage it on their own. I don't know where it's going to go or what's going to happen, but they certainly have a significant learning curve in managing such a massive facility with so many people flowing through. But they've also got great support and organizations like us that want to see their success. I mean, if you look at wilderness around the world, I think the latest stat was 85% of the wilderness still extant in the world is managed by indigenous peoples. So it's generally, I think, safe to say that people who have that direct cultural ancestral connection to the land and to nature are going to do a better job than people who don't. Yeah. And I think they're doing a great job as they rise to the occasion. And it's very exciting when they had the handover, the pride and the joy and the light coming from their faces was just, it was wonderful. And it's a real honor to be able to work with them and to learn how to support what they're doing. The idea isn't to do anything for them or to, represent for them. It's how can we support? What do you need? How can we help? Will this work? And, working with Kristin, we've identified grants that are providing for traditional custodian staff at our current nursery and our new nursery. And I think, we're at the beginnings of a really beautiful partnership. We've been in partnership for 3 years. Things take longer up in far north Queensland. This I've learned the hard way, but things do work out. And it's really beautiful to see these different plans and these intentions and these dreams, coming true.
All things happen when they're supposed to fall in line at the right time. Yeah. No, that's really beautiful. And I think there was a cheer from everyone when that passed, and that land was given back, essentially. I think it was a bit of a sigh of relief. Yeah. You mentioned about you worked with a biologist, a scientist, can't remember the title, around understanding what diversity of plants need to be put back when you're doing replanting. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that kind of process comes about? Because it's not as simple as like, oh, yeah, we're just going to plant a bunch of pine trees, right? So how does that kind of work?
I'll chat to that first, Alex, but just to clarify, I'm referred to as KP as well as Kristin. So if you get confused, there's not another person sitting next to me.
I figured so much.
Oh gosh, this is one of the subjects of Rainforest Rescue that I absolutely love talking about. And, you know, I'm sure I don't do it complete justice, but it's been such a learning curve for me. You know, when you look at a beautiful intact rainforest, be it the Daintree Rainforest, the number of different species that exist there, their roles for all flora and fauna, you know, the devastation that would occur if one wasn't there, and, you know, that ripple effect. We've got an amazing nursery manager, Maureen, who, you know, if she could have anything tattooed across her head, it would be genetic diversity of species, because she's just, you know, that is just everything. And she's taught me and all of us so much about it, that, you know, there needs to be just the highest integrity when it comes to propagating, which is a fancy word for growing seedlings to then be planted onto the land, because we must make sure that we are getting as close as we can to, you know, a pristine working rainforest. So it's, you know, there's just such a range of different species that need to live there. You know, things that I never thought of, you know, cassowaries, they have food called, you know, the cassowary plum or idiospermin. You know, when the crew creates this or grows it and then plants it, they plant it way away from the road, and that makes complete sense. You know, but all the intricacies of these species and, you know, the methods to which they are then planted is huge. And I think even things like seed collection, which Branden made reference to, Jebel Bin Aboriginal Corporation, and we're just so blessed and honored. And, you know, I've cried a lot of times at Rainforest Rescue from happiness, and definitely that was my biggest sob the day that we got, you know, the funding to employ Jebel Bin Aboriginal Corporation nursery hands and horticulturalists. It's just, you know, such an honor to work with them and learn from everything that they will contribute for our organization and the new nursery. But you know, it's just knowing that you know, you can't be collecting seeds from, you know, one mother tree too much. You know, you can't deplete one piece of land too much. And, you know, there's just so much in it that I'm still blown away by it.
And just to add on to that, there's two things that I just want to refer to. One is around seed collection. We have very strict ethical seed collection guidelines that we.
What are those guidelines? I need to know these guidelines.
Well, I'll send you a copy of it. But basically, the baseline of it is, you know, don't take too many seeds from one place. I think the max we can do is 20%. I don't know how you measure that on a day-to-day basis, but I mean, you get a sense of, you know, what's okay and what's not okay. We certainly are dependent upon the health of our seed stock, so we're always going to make sure that we're not taking too much, and we also take from lots of different places so that we make sure that the genetic diversity is good, that you're not going to wind up with, you know, inbreeding and plants that are ultimately not going to thrive and could bring the rest of the ecosystem down. And then I wanted just to mention the fella that you asked about is Dr. Robert Koyman, and you spell that Kooyman, Koyman. Well published, well revered, well loved, really terrific guy. I see him when we go up to the Daintree as a staff group. I was walking along this path in the forest, and Robert, you know, he dresses like a forest ranger because he lives in the forest, and he's got this fabulous akubra, and I hear this crashing in the forest coming through, and I was like, oh wow, what is that? Is it a cassowary? And nope, it was Robert, and he ran, and he went off the trail onto, you know, and he was looking for, you know, certain trees that he's tracking over time. And you know, he's doing a really big restoration project in Madagascar, of all places. Tried doing that during a pandemic. Right. And, you know, he's doing a massive restoration project where a mine was. So talk about your industrial strength restoration. And Dr. Koyman has put together our strategy, or our model of restoration that requires a certain density of plantings so that you're going to quickly mitigate the problems that you get with weeds. And weeds in the Daintree grow so fast. Some of them, guinea grass, you can watch it grow. Like guinea grass will grow within 2 weeks, it'll hit 2 meters. It's amazing stuff, and it's really nasty. So the whole goal is to get rapid canopy closure so that you don't have to worry about maintenance and whippersnipping and keeping the weeds at bay. And our current land manager, our only most wonderful, we're so grateful for him, land manager, Justin McMahon. He's just doing so many cool, innovative things to improve the efficiency of our efforts. And like lately he's using the weeds that he's cutting down as an effective mulch by treating it in a certain way so that it doesn't actually just make more weeds. Anyway, it all flows from a commitment to good science. And then it's just commitment.
Like anything, like how long does it take to get canopy closure from bare land?
We say 2.5, 3 years, Branden?
2 years generally.
Yeah.
And
also just speaking about what Branden made reference there to, Alex, you asked initially about the challenges. Probably one of the biggest challenges is weeds. And, to have that canopy closure, that then, obviously is a natural way to reduce the weeds. But yeah, I mean, Justin, our land manager, he's just rocking. And in terms of also what Branden said, the guinea grass, being able to watch it grow is really not a lie. It grows so quickly. But, they're doing really cool stuff up there. Justin and the assistant land manager, Siggy, who's wonderful. Also, they're creating windbreaks on land to reduce the amount of weeds and seeds that are, flown in the air, that then it reduces the drying out of the seedlings. But yeah, as Branden said too, there's this awesome project that I want to get funded if anyone is out there listening, called Green Carbon Mulch, and it's basically what Branden just said. Then Justin works very intuitively with the indigenous, weather patterns up there, and also looking at ways to work with things as a way to work against them. And in this instance, I love it. He wants to work with the friendlier weeds. So in case we were all giving the guinea grass a greasy, it is one of the friendlier ones in some aspects. And, he'd love to use that and create kind of a green carbon mulch program where we mulch that up and use that as kind of like a bedding or protecting to the seedlings to stop weeds come up. But it also then keeps the moisture in. And maintains the integrity of the soil and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And just to throw in there, sorry. Justin's currently working on 2 different restoration projects with Siggy, and the first one we've been working on for quite a few years. It's ex sugarcane field, so you can imagine how tired and depleted that soil would be. It's not even soil anymore; it's dirt. And the amount of weed seeds that are lying dormant in that soil after so many years of constant chemical application, that is what was the impetus for this green mulch program. How do we do this in ways that are eco-friendly and good for everything. And then the other property that we just started in on is in the upper Daintree. If anyone is at their computer and they've got hands-free and they want to just Google Earth real quick, look at the Daintree village. It's on the south side of the Daintree River. And then just scan, kind of to the west, northwest, and you'll just see this big scar. Like, wow, what happened to the rainforest there? It's just this massive scar up the Daintree River Valley. And that's Stewart Creek and Douglas Creek split off and become the Daintree River. And, that's what happens when you get cattle ranching. And one of the properties all the way at the top end of the Douglas Creek side of Daintree River Valley is called Tranquility. And Justin started an initial planting program there about a year ago. And we've already got, I think, 12 or 15,000 trees in the ground, and it's going really well. So it's very exciting to be moving into a different ecotype and to be doing what we do in a way that is going to be inspiring for a different set altogether, and at the same time is making really terrific inroads into parts of the Daintree that we want to restore.
I really like that. I recently did a permaculture course, and one of the things which kept coming up was like the problem is the solution. And I get really excited when I hear things about dealing with weed seeds and dealing with these grasses, which might seem like a pest, but actually there's a solution in there so we can make it work for us. And I think that can be applied on a much smaller scale, even when we're in our backyard doing some gardening and we've got a weed coming through, or we don't get quite the right sun aspect that we're after. There's always a solution in the problem. We just need to perhaps look at it from a different perspective sometimes, and we can make it work for us.
And it's a great time to get your friends involved and get more people to come help it, because many hands make light work, and get more people's hands in the ground, and they'll be wanting to do more of it themselves.
Amen. Okay. So Branden, we are where we are. We're in 2022. There's lots of things going well in the world, and there's some things going not so well. I'm curious what your outlook is on where we're heading in terms of the climate, and where we're heading in terms of what the world's doing about it. Are we going in the right direction?
That's such a big question. So we touched on it a little bit earlier, talking about the different carbon schemes that are available out there, and the fact that there are new initiatives that are designed to reward landowners for performing restoration services on their land. And I mentioned that it feels at times like, it's this race, right? It's like, who's going to win? Is it going to be the trees, or is it going to be the other guys? I feel like we're heading on the right path when it comes to the types of programs that are being put forward that leverage an economic incentive to encourage people to restore land, protect habitat, protect forest. I also know that it's a very tough world out there, and that capitalism, it's about your economic returns. So I think until we agree that we can live, somewhat differently, there's got to be a way that we can decrease the pressure on everyone so that everybody doesn't feel like they have to work so hard just to pay the rent and all the things that people feel like they need to have, and all the pressure that it comes, God, just being parents in the world, when you've got, the privilege of living in a country like Australia, and you want to make sure that your kids have what they need to be successful in this world. What does it mean to be successful in this world if we're destroying the life support system? There's an awareness that's growing, and then there's a lack of awareness that's growing. It's a very interesting, this is just my perspective. This is not Rainforest Rescue's perspective on it. This is just me having been in the environmental scene for a long time and looked at it from a lot of different angles. And I remain hopeful, partially because I think that's just in my genetics, but also because I see how many people are involved. There's a great book by Paul Hawken called Blessed Unrest. And this book, if you haven't heard about it, it might be a little dated now, but it doesn't matter. The message is the same, and it's still strong. It's the notion that, he used to go to different conferences, and he would speak, and people would give him their business cards, and he would collect the business cards. And pretty soon he had garbage bags full of business cards in his garage. And he wound up, getting some interns to go through and catalog all of these different people who represented different organizations that were doing good in the world. And at the end of his presentation, he says, well, here's the list. And he's got this list scrolling behind him on the screen. It's kind of like the beginning to Star Wars, right? Like the long list. And, it's a lot of names, and each organization is working to make the world a better place. And they're all staffed by people who care about doing good versus, making money. And he says, look, it's going to take a while. And he speeds this list up. And pretty soon it's like, it's a blur. You can't read anything. It's just whooshing past. And he said, so we could sit here all day long. And this was in the morning. We could sit here all day long, and we could go to sleep and come back tomorrow. And tomorrow at about, this time, we would get to the end of this list at this speed. And the idea is that there is so much good going on that we are not aware of. And if we choose where we put our awareness carefully to really focus on that which is good, and which is making the world a better place, which is looking after our environment, which is looking after ourselves, which is looking after our future, so that everybody's got the chance at having a magnificent life on this incredible, miraculous planet, then we've got a chance. And it's about where we put our awareness and then what we do with it.
Hell yeah. Man, thank you. What a beautiful message. I want to end it there, but before we do, you have any final words, Branden, Kristin, that you guys want to share with everyone tuned in right with us right now?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for listening, because that shows a really wonderful intention to what we're talking about. And also, I like this focus on hope, because there really is a lot. I mean, we've got, as Found Space is part of, we've got 148 partners, businesses, then more foundations, then more conservation partners. And we didn't include in that list Great Barrier Reef Legacy, which is a beautiful partner of ours. There is hope, and every week I open my inbox and we have new businesses and new individuals wanting to help protect the rainforest. So I guess I just wanted to end with a bit of gratitude for all of those people and hope.
Beautiful.
I'm going to second that because it's true. Not only does the increasing number of businesses and individuals, people following us on our social media, please follow us on Instagram, please follow us on Facebook. We're growing because people care.
Yeah.
And we're a good example of what we've been talking about, why we should be hopeful, because there are more people than we are aware of who really care about our future and about the environment, who would put trees before capital. It's just a matter of numbers, and we're growing. So, I really appreciate you sharing your platform with us and taking this time with us, and your very thoughtful questions and your kindness and your partnership. And a big thank you to everybody out there who has taken this time to listen to what we have to say. Thank you. And please, sign up on our list. We won't spam you. It's rainforestrescue.org.au. And we have a lot of good news that we share. So if you need one news source, we don't put a lot out, but when you get it, it's good.
Quality over quantity. I like that.
Yes.
And gratitude right back to you guys. Everything. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for the really important work that you do. It's as you said, it's hopeful and it's inspiring. So thank you guys so much. You've already kind of covered it. Is there anywhere else that people can find out about Rainforest Rescue that you haven't mentioned? Facebook, Instagram, anywhere else?
Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. But really, I think do it all. Sign up on our mailing list. Follow us on Instagram. Check out our Facebook page.
Come to our tree planting event.
Come on up to the tree planting. We do tree plantings up in the Daintree generally every month, but we have a big one annually. This year it's going to be on Saturday, May 6th. So May 6th, 2023, be in the Daintree. Come plant a few thousand trees, meet a bunch of really terrific, like-minded people, and enjoy lunch with us. That's Madeline. She's our board chair. Hi, Matt. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Branden, Kristin, it's been a pleasure having you on, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks so much, Alex.